Thank you. Okay, so that must mean it is 12 o'clock. So let's get ready to go here. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today. My name is Peggy West. I'm the organizer. And I thought I'd start out with something a little bit funny since it's on painting. And I said, why was the painter running down the street? Audience. Because his paint was running. Okay. Okay. All right.
I'll cover that on the seminar there, Peg.
Okay, there you go. There you go. Runny paint, right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, today we're going to have two classes by Rudy Forjan of Benjamin Moore. The first class is going to be Paint 101, Practical Solutions and Problem Solving Techniques. And class 2 will be Painting Projects Planning Process, which I think is an awesome topic because planning is how it comes out very successful. First, I want to thank everybody that's on today. I want to thank the board members and the CAMs, and also especially those of you who have been our followers for the entire year. I want to say a special thank you today. And I want to get started pretty quick here, introducing all the sponsors. First, I'd like to say that I am helping on a consulting basis now with Grand Key Commercial. It's a construction company doing renovations at condominiums and clubhouses. They've been around since 2000, based out of Coconut Creek, Florida. So if anybody needs anything, renovations at your condo, this is a really good company, and I'd be glad to introduce you to their project managers and get you a quote. Next, I want to introduce Layla Scola. She's the head of marketing. And I want to say thank you, Layla, for the whole year of everything you've done for this seminars to be successful. Layla's with Vinteum Software. So say a few words about yourself, please, and the company.
Thank you, Peggy, and thank you for the kind thank you. I've said thank you a lot, but it's always a pleasure working with you and organizing these webinars. So Vinteum Software is a software company. We've been in the business for almost 10 years now. We provide websites and portals for HOAs and condos across Florida and the whole of North America. And we have just launched a new software to help with inspections. Super important right now. So if you are interested in a website or with help with inspections, please do get in touch.
Very good. Awesome. Okay, next I want to introduce our moderator for today, Rudy Martin. He is the Director of Strategic Business Development for M2 Engineering. Rudy, tell us about yourself and M2 Engineering.
Thank you. I am Rudy Martin, the Director of Strategic Business Development. M2E Engineering is a full-service engineering firm. We provide everything from turnovers from when the building's developed to the milestone inspections after the building's been up for 30 years. So anything that has to do with your building envelope, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, roofing, anything of that sort, please reach out to me for a free consultation. Also, I am moderating this. Usually we do questions kind of during this segment. We're going to do it a little bit different. There's a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. As Rudy talks about all of the great benefits and the things to look out for in painting. If you have a question, go ahead and type it in that Q&A. Towards the end of the seminar, we will go ahead and we'll go on there. We'll go rapid fire through those Q&As, and then we'll take it from there. So any questions, please put them in that Q&A. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Rudy, so much for everything and all year long, too. Next, I wanted to have you speak directly or have him introduce himself. Chris Clark. He's the marketing manager for the state of Florida for Munyon Painting. And he has been tied at the hip down in Fort Myers area. So unfortunately, he's not going to be on today, but Munyon Painting is an excellent source for waterproofing and painting. Next, I'll move on to Beth Garcia-Swopa. She is the Vice President for Brown & Brown Insurance. Beth, tell us about yourself and Brown & Brown.
Hi, thank you, Peggy. So Brown & Brown is a privately owned insurance brokerage. We're 83 years old. We are a national company. We are privately held, but traded on the New York Stock Exchange. As far as myself, I'm a 32-year agent. I do specialize within associations. As we know, with the hurricanes we have seen recently and events such as Surfside, insurance issues have become a big problem. And it's good for associations to get ahead of it and not wait for your renewal in order to start that process. So if you want to contact me, I'd be more than happy to do an evaluation of your insurance program. I'll be the first to tell you if you're with a great carrier in the right place, or if I see there's some things you can fix, I'll let you know that as well. I'll put my information in the contact or the chat box.
Great. Thank you, Beth. And that
You're welcome.
reminds me, I forgot to mention that I will be sending out a sponsor list of everybody that's sponsoring today and presenting. It'll have contact information to reach Beth and everyone. Next, I want to introduce Bill Kilgallen. He's the tax specialist at Hafer Company. Bill, tell us about yourself and Hafer.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Bill Kilgallen with Hafer CPAs. Our firm serves over 750 associations. We provide audit, tax, and consulting services. On the audit side, we have 3 levels of audit service for those that have different revenue amounts. We've got compilations, we've got reviews, and then we've got the full-blown audit. And at this point, we can help you understand the new rules that are regarding the building inspections and especially the reserve funding as you complete your budgets for this year. Have a great class, and thank you, Peggy.
You're welcome. Yeah, those reserves. Okay, next I want to introduce Dawn Miller. She is the Director of Business Development at the Paving Lady. And Dawn, tell us about yourself and the company.
Thank you, Peggy. I'm Dawn. I'm with the Paving Lady. We are a full-service asphalt contractor that's been in business since 1985. We do asphalt overlays, seal coating, ADA upgrades to your common areas and parking lots. We also do striping. If you have any questions, please give us a call. This is the time of year for the budget season and getting everything approved. So we'll be happy to come out and give you an estimate. My information's in the chat box, and enjoy the class. Have a great day.
Okay, great. Thanks, Dawn. Okay, next I have the pleasure of introducing Jimmy Gonzalez, longtime friend, Regional Business Development Director for LM Funding. Jimmy, tell us about yourself and the company.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Peggy, and thank you for this great class that you're offering here today. And congratulations to the CAMs and board members for attending and doing your due diligence and taking care of your communities. LM Funding has been in service since 2008. We are a publicly traded company, serviced over 14,000 collection events. We manage and monitor the entire process for the associations, and not a penny should be charged back to them, even in the event that there is not a collection due to a bankruptcy or a bank foreclosure. Many people in the business have heard of us, and they are a little leery of this type of scenario, but we use only collection attorneys. I'd just like to read a script from a board president, David Sheets, president of Emerald Isles at Laguna Lakes. We have serviced 46 units for them since May of 2019. It says, excellent service. This company does what they say they will do. I strongly recommend them. This is on a Google review. So I will be more than happy to share with you all of the happy customers that we have brought in over the years. My information will be into the chat box. Thank you. Have a great class, and we'll hopefully speak to you soon.
Awesome. Okay. All right. Next, I want to introduce a longtime friend of mine, but he's a new sponsor to the condos in the South Florida area. John Gant. He is the National Recycle Consultant with World One. John, tell us about yourself and what you guys do for condos and HOAs.
Hello, everyone. First, I'm very excited to work with you, Peggy. Again, it's been a while. Very excited. But what we do at World One, we are a Florida-based 25-year-old waste reduction and recycling consultant. We work with close to 1,000 commercial buildings, and what we do is we work on efficiencies and streamlining, cost savings on any type of commercial business. We've been doing this for, again, 25 years. We've got operations trucks in the area, operations guys in the area to handle your emergencies. I know no one ever has emergencies in this crazy industry. So we try to do go over and above what other waste and recycle haulers can offer and do. So it's totally free consulting. I'd love to look at any building and see if we could help solve some costing issues with you, or some efficiencies, or get a little bit more recycling out of your location.
Okay, great, John. Thank you and welcome and good luck this market. Do some networking with these sponsors now. Last, and I'm excited to introduce Lisa Elkin. And Lisa, take it away from Alliance Association Bank. What do you have for us today, Lisa?
Well, good afternoon. I'm Lisa Elkin with Alliance Association Bank. And as you know, it's almost Thanksgiving. So it's time to gobble up the CD specials at Alliance Association Bank, AAB. Just a reason to smile, wouldn't you agree? There are so many things to be thankful for, so many reasons. For us, it's helping your communities now and every season. With lending and our fee-free lockbox, we make the banking process an easy thing, just taking away your stress and headaches as you enjoy each turkey wing. AB's products and services are the stuffing to your turkey. So try us out before your leftovers turn to jerky. So don't forget our special gravy to pour on your mashed. Contact me about our CD specials with rates that will help increase your cash. So remember, with Lisa at AB, it's one focus and one expertise, and that's time and money savings for your communities. And I want to wish each and every one of you a very happy Thanksgiving holiday.
Oh, thank you so much. I love that. I love it. Love it. Okay. Now I have the pleasure of introducing not just a prestigious speaker for today, but a longtime friend as well, Rudy Forjan. Rudy has been with Benjamin Moore, one of the leading U.S. paint manufacturers for the United States, over 30 years. And he is the territorial representative and is an area icon in painting, in the painting industry. He not only gives these classes, you guys, he is responsible for growing the business in South Florida through his dealers, and it is a great resource for painting needs. He's always available, and I would like you to meet Rudy Forjan. Rudy, take it away and tell us more about yourself, your goals, and Benjamin Moore.
Okay, thank you, Peggy, very much. And that's going to be a tough act to follow after what Lisa did there. So we'll do the best we can. So again, thank you for the opportunity to be able to be part of the class, to do the class for all of you. My name, as said, is Rudy Forjan with Benjamin Moore. I've been with the Benjamin Moore Company for a little bit over 33 years, all down here in South Florida. And I've been working with communities and buildings all the way from Key West up to Vero Beach in that time. I work now in the Palm Beach market up to Vero Beach. So any kind of, I know the market, I know the buildings, I know quite a few of the contractors and so forth. And, you know, I know a lot of you guys here that are working on here. So the classes that I want to present, I'm going to go ahead and bring up the first class. We're going to do Paint 201, which is called the, let me get it back up to here. Oops. And let me share my screen. Okie doke. You guys see that? Okie doke. All right. Did you hear me?
We can
Yes, okay.
hear you,
Yes.
we can see you, we can see the
Okay, perfect. All
presentation.
right, just want to make sure I didn't, everything went quiet, so it's kind of a little bit strange to do this way. So, all right, so the Paint 201, and the reason why we try to do this class is that when you have multiple amount of choices, when you're picking different lines, when you're painting your building in different lines of paint, and like if you know, I'm a big wine drinker, and there's a lot of different choices to get from, but the more you know about the product that you're getting, and the environment that we're living in with paint especially, it just gives you an opportunity to make better, do a better, have a better solutions and have a better understanding of what you're getting and how you're getting. Like I always try to say in all my presentations, paint is we all paint to give it the aesthetic look, to give it a real nice, pretty look, to raise the value of the properties and so forth. But what I always like to talk about the fact is that paint is your first line of defense against on your communities and on your buildings. And it's the first line it's your protection. So if you were to leave all these substrates not painted, then you would have quite a bit of an issue. So one of the reasons I like to do that is to be able to go through it so you can understand the differences and some of the things you're going to run into with paint. So here's the provider information, and we'll get all that afterwards. I would like the credits will be issued to you online. So go ahead and make sure that your CAM numbers are in place and they can be legible. And I'll send those in later this afternoon as soon as I get the list. And we'll try to get them scheduled. Usually takes me about a week to get everything put through, and how cooperative the state of Florida is at this point. So we'll put that. If you want a certificate, please reach out to me and email me, and I'll be more than happy to email your certificate. My contact information will be with what Peggy's going to give you. And also at the top of the chat list, you'll see my contact information there as well. So what we're going to try to learn today in this particular class is the classification of paints, basically what paints are and what they do. One of the things that's going to affect paint in our market, especially, is the factors that are going to affect curing and drying. We're going to dive a little bit on top of that. We're also going to talk a little bit about surface prep. And the reason I like to talk about this is it's really important, because you could buy the best paint in the world and you have the improper or poor preparation, you're going to have a failure and the product is not going to work for you. So 80% of the complaints that I run into, and hopefully, thankfully, it's not too many. A lot of these complaints you run into, generally about close to 90% is due to lack of preparation or poor preparation that's being used on these surfaces. And then also, I like to talk about some causes and solutions for some of the common paint problems. So because if you know the answer to a solution to a paint problem, then you could recommend and use the right particular product as you were going on. So again, we'll go through here. There's a lot we're going to cover. Again, make sure you put your Q&As, your questions into the Q&As. We'll try to go through it as much as possible. And I like to do it this way just to make sure we get through the information out there. This presentation will be available through PDF as well. You could either email me or Peggy, and we'll be more than happy to get these out there to you. Okay. So when we're talking about paint being classified, paints are classified by the resin. The three different parts of the paint, three common parts of the paint. It's real basic. It's going to be the pigment, which is the part that we see. It's going to be the solvent that we put into the paint to be able to apply that on there. And then the resin or the glue that holds everything together to the substrate itself. And the paints that when you see a paint, it is called by generally the resin type. For instance, latex paint. When you hear the word latex paint, it's usually a latex resin being used on there, and the characteristics that come along with that. Oil-based paints or alkyd-based paints are generally that, usually with a solvent-based product, petroleum type of chemical and so forth. And then there's other things like epoxies and so forth. We'll touch base on that, but whenever you see paint, they're all basically the same thing. There's not a lot of secrets in the paint business. The paint business is one of the oldest businesses around. It's been around for a long time. So the differences between one another is actually what we're putting into the can of paint and the performance we expect out of the can of paint itself. So having this kind of knowledge will help you be able to prevent any kind of problems in the future and make sure you're not overpaying for something and at the same time not underpaying. The biggest part of when you're doing any kind of a painting project, paint only accommodates for about 15 to 20% of the cost of a job. So the biggest part is the actual labor and application. So we always like to make sure that you're using your right paint, and so that money that you're spending is wisely spent. So again, we talked about how to classify paint. Again, as I said, is by the resin type. that's what's going on there, and or the curing mechanism, but we'll touch a little bit about that. The resin is really going to be the part of the paint that's going to contribute to the performance of the product itself. And it's going to give you the protection, it's going to give you the durability that you need. The curing method is really what's going to influence the drying time of the product. And we're going to dive into that a little bit more. As we talked about, a couple of the more common resin types that you're going to run into is oils and alkyds, which are the solvent-based, petroleum-based solvents. The latex acrylics are probably right now the most used product, probably about 90 to 95% of what's sold in the market right now are latex products. Latexes have come a long way in the last 20 years in regards to durability and how they perform. So there's been a lot of changes in the market itself. And then, of course, there's going to be epoxies and urethanes, which again are used, but they have a little bit more of a limited capacity. And another part that what you're going to see in there, there's a lot of what we call waterborne type resins, and especially in the epoxies and urethanes and alkyds, where there's a solvent, a petroleum solvent being used. The new technology and the regulations from the EPA are forcing a lot of us paint manufacturers to be able to do a friendlier VOC compliant type product. And the biggest challenge that we face as manufacturers is to get the performance of a waterborne type resin to perform the same way as it does with its cousin in the solvent-based product. So that's where the biggest change happens, and you'll see a lot of that moving forward with the companies as we move forward. So again, the way paint dries or the curing mechanisms, and there's a difference between the way paint dry, the drying of a paint and the curing, but most paints will dry by a solvent evaporation. I mentioned 3 components to the can of paint. The solvent, which kind of makes everything a little bit easier to apply, is going to be the product that's going to evaporate into the atmosphere. And that's where the EPA jumps on the top of a lot of our manufacturers itself to be able to kind of control what's being emitted into the atmosphere. Coalescence, it's a way that generally happens with latex and acrylic resins. Coalescence is a bonding, a kind of a fusing and a binding together of the pigment and the resin together. It's a process that you use with latex paints. And oxidation generally refers to alkyd-based paints or product oil-based paints, where the curing mechanism is that the resin, or the binder, as it's called, will oxidize. In other words, it reacts with the oxygen in the air and it gets into a curing process. And you'll see that in this particular instance with oxidation occurs at a pretty rapid pace with oil-based paints to a certain point. And then once it reaches its curing or its hardest state, it actually continues to do so. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. But the drying versus curing that we're talking about, drying occurs when the solvent evaporates from the coating. With oil-based paints, that really never happens. It's always in a kind of a curing process. But curing, and this is the definition you have to understand between drying and curing. Curing is when the coating is going to reach its optimum hardness and as hard as it's going to get. So that's a big difference between there, because we'll go over here in just a little bit, but latex paints dry very quickly, but the curing process is pretty long. And oil-based paints, they dry a little bit longer, but the curing process is actually a little bit shorter. So some of the things that we have to deal with, and this is why it's so important to understand when you're working with the coatings in South Florida, is that we do have such things as temperature. We deal a little bit with that. That will affect how the coating cures, air movement, relative humidity. That's something that we don't deal with down here. And of course, dew point. That has a kind of a factor on there. Temperatures will affect, and generally, thankfully in South Florida, even though we have hot temperatures, we generally don't run into a lot of issues with the temperature affecting the viscosity of the product itself and bonding. If you get out in some of the dry west areas where you have temperatures over 100, you start to getting a little bit of that. Oil-based paint sometimes on the outside will get a little bit thinner and run a little bit more. Like the joke that Peggy said, the paint was running. You can have a little bit of an issue with that if it's with oil-based paints on the outside. Latex paints don't have that big of an issue. However, a lot of air movement will tend to, if you're painting on a windy day, it can shorten up the dry time for oil-based paints and for latex even faster than what they are. So that increased air movement with latex paints will not allow the paint to kind of like flow out, and it can cause some cratering or some bubbling that dries into the coating itself. So you have to kind of keep these into consideration when you're using the products for any project that you're going to be doing, whether it's a big project or a maintenance project itself. High humidities when you're using oil-based paints. And again, oil-based paints is just not a product that's being used a lot anymore. The solvent, the carbon compounds that are being released, or the volatile organic compounds, are very high in the petroleum-based solvent-based products. So that's where a lot of that is changing. High humidity, if a particular oil-based finish gets a little bit of dampness or a humidity on there, it can affect the way the color appears on the surface, and that can cause a little bit of a problem. And again, high humidity, of course, with a latex-based product will not allow that product to properly cure, and low humidity will cause that solvent to evaporate too quickly from the coating itself. So you have to be able to kind of judge that into the when you're used to selecting the kind of paint. The dew point can affect the performance of the paints as well, and we'll touch base on that a little bit. But when you're dealing with high or low humidity, again, the coatings that are being sold by most manufacturers here, not only by us, they're made to be able to withstand the kind of what we're dealing with in South Florida, especially with the temperature. South Florida is known as basically a 365 year-round painting community, unlike other areas of the country where you start to get real cold temperatures. But again, the mild temperatures really makes it a little bit easier. The dew point, when you reach dew points, understand that dew points is when the temperature of the air reaches the saturation point. You get a lot of that dew point when a good analogy I like to use is when you walk out in the morning and you see your car covered in dew or water. A lot of that, it's not, that water is not only on the cars, it's basically on everything outside. You see the same thing on the windows of your home when you get that water on there. You have to be able to take that into effect, especially not so much early in the morning, but obviously you don't want to paint on top of a wet surface, but you do want to be able to, you have to stop sometimes when you know that the temperatures are going to be to the point where the dew point is going to be close to the temperature you can get to saturation. You don't want to finish too late in the day or paint at night, because that will that dew accumulating on that surface will affect how that latex paint's going to dry, and you can get a certain amount of running or improper cure and preparation of the surface. So you have to keep that into account when you're classifying the different or using the different kind of paints on there. Surface prep to me is the key to any kind of a paint job. You don't prep a surface right, you're going to get failures, regardless of the quality of the coating you're using. I mean, in fact, I would rather have a highly prepared surface using an economical or cheap coating than a lack of preparation and using the good kind, the best coating available. You're going to get failures. Most of us down here are repainting on top of existing surfaces. So you have to be able to clean those surfaces and prepare those surfaces properly. We're going to get into a little bit of some of the surfaces to paint and what are some of the basic things that we're going to go in there. As we go into the next class, when you're online, we're going to be talking about something called the specification. And specifications are an instruction that we'll give to the contractors, but it gives you what we do on here is to give you the industry standard specifications for preparing different surfaces that you're dealing with. And that is real key. And you have to be able to understand what that is, because if you were to get different painting contractors to ask you without a manufacturer involved, I've seen the kind of instructions from no information at all to just some of the kind of wacky different type of preparation standards that are not needed. That's a little bit of overkill. I have a good friend that moved to Atlanta, and they got a painting contractor to put a bid on their home, and the bid essentially says paint and prime. And then they gave a price. They didn't talk about the coating, they didn't talk about the preparation standards or anything. And you really need to be able to understand this when you're painting your community or your home or whatever, to be able to get a better understanding of what is that contractor doing, and to challenge that painting contractor to do what you want them to do. And that's kind of the purpose of doing this class, is to get you that understanding that you can't accept just that kind of information. There are a lot of good contractors out there that will do the job right. However, there's only one bad apple can ruin the whole bushel. So having the information beforehand really helps you make sure that you're doing the right job on there. And again, when you're painting with wood and metal, when you're painting on wood and metal, the substrates, especially in South Florida, are very, very unstable. There's a lot of movement, contraction of the expansion and contraction of the substrates. So preparation on these two substrates are really, really important to make sure you're doing the job right. And generally on wood and metal, there's a different type of coating being put on there, so that requires a little bit more preparation. So with wood itself, thankfully, this is not a picture of a common wood surface that we have in South Florida. But again, obviously never paint any kind of a wood surface when it's wet. It has to be completely dry to be able to fill on there. Holes and cracks need to be patchless like any other type of surface itself. And then the type of wood that you're painting is really going to determine what's going to be needed on there. Again, look to your paint manufacturers such as myself, even if it comes to a home, or to some of the guys working, or the men and women that are working at the paint stores, to be able to give you these kind of answers. And that's what we're here for. But the kind of wood that you're painting will affect the kind of preparations you're going to need, and also the kind of finish that you're going to need on there. So you have to kind of take those into account itself when you're painting on wood itself. Staining wood is real easy. Again, back to the same thing with woods. When you're staining a wood, please understand that the color of the wood or the porosity of the wood or the type of wood will affect how the stain will look on when you start staining a surface itself. So that's real and key to do that. And you cannot stain on top of already painted finishes or a surface that's already stained, because that will affect how that stain will look on the surface itself. We're talking about here, when you're restaining a finished wood surface, you've got to get down to the bare wood finishes so that it can be able to kind of absorb the stain into the wood itself. You could use different, there are some wood bleach systems available that will help that better wood. But again, as we all know, in South Florida, we don't have a lot of bare wood finishes because the environment, the humidity, the rain, and so forth, all kind of affect how that coating is going to look on here. If you do use a clear finish, due to the angle of the sun that we have in South Florida and the UV rays, you're going to have to even if you do everything over and prepare everything properly, you probably will not get any more than 2, maybe 3 years of the finish itself down in South Florida before having to redo it itself. Painting masonry, that's again what we usually do. Most of the time we don't paint on brand new masonry. We're repainting our buildings and homes. And regardless of where the coating is at, the whole idea behind when you're painting any type of substrate is to keep water out. Concrete, masonry, stucco, it all has a certain amount of pH in there. These are the alkali salts that are inherent and naturally in all these kind of finishes. Water tends to reactivate that. And what is pH? It's that alkali that will affect the bonding of the paint and will affect the reaction of the alkali salts with the resin, which will affect the bonding of the paint. So you have to make sure you understand that and make sure you're trying to keep the water out of there. When you're painting brand new surfaces, again, highly porous surfaces, you really need to fill that porous surfaces. Concrete, stucco, all these surfaces, they're essentially a dry sponge. So you really have to make sure that all these surfaces are sealed properly before you start to paint anything. And of course, the hot masonry is what we talk about. When you have a high alkali surfaces, that's what in the industry we call it hot masonry. and it can get a burning of that resin. A lot of times with repainted surfaces, if you ever see a crack in the wall and you see kind of a streak of white powder kind of running down the way that water runs, that is the water getting into the wall, the water picking up the salts inside masonry. And then as soon as it comes out, the water evaporates and it deposits these salts, generally in an up and down pattern. And if you see patterns like roller marks, or you see up and down patterns or vertical patterns, that's usually an indication of the substrate that's causing that issue. If there are paint failures, and I'm not saying it as a paint guy, as there is paint failures, paint will, if there's a defect with the paint, which is hard to do, it will be all over the surfaces. If it's only in certain areas, that's generally due to the substrate, to some circumstance happening, or the application itself. So painting metal, again, the types that we use on there is latex for outside for galvanized steel or waterborne coatings. If you were to paint a galvanized metal surface with an oil-based paint, you'll get something called saponification. And when you're painting new, and that will again react with the resin and cause the kind of peeling paint that you're seeing on this particular photo here itself. But the latex, again, is generally what you use. But cleaning these surfaces is the most important part. Why do people paint? Again, we talked a little bit about it before. Color, of course, sets the mood, gives you the aesthetic value of what the coating is going to do for you. And a lot of times, in certain instances, this is for safety as well. Sheen is a big deal. It gives you the kind of the appearance and the performance you're going to get out of the coating. But as I've said at the beginning of the class, protection is the reason why you should be painting your substrates, regardless of what it is. So that's why it's important, if you're using a product to be able to protect your surface, try to use the best product you can possible to be able to do that for you. And using this, and that protection should always be at the top of the list, at the top of your concern when you're doing any kind of a repaint job itself. Color, and again, what you're seeing here is the kind of the color wheel that our colleague Sir Isaac Newton put together. And the colors that you see on the color wheel, again, is the kind of colors, and he put it through a prism, and I don't know understand the complete science how he did with it, but all white light as we see during the day has all, if you put it through a prism, has all these different colors in the white light itself. When you put all these colors together, believe it or not, we get that white finish that we're getting, that we see on here. So when you're looking at color is when you're painting your home or community, or even a room, it's always the most emotional part of a paint job, trying to select what the color is going to be. It affects how you look at things. There is a psychology in color as well. I could actually talk about color for hours on end. There's university classes that go on into about color itself. So there's a lot of factors about color. I'm going to be touching on it just on a real quick basis. When you look at colors like this here, all these colors, and you're seeing it on a kind of a vertical type of plane, but when you look at color, when you see a color wheel like this, try to imagine inverting it into a different, into a different plane. And then there's different shades and different colors in each of those stacks. So you could go from the darkest version, say, of a yellow to the real lightest version of a yellow. And all that falls in with the same kind of stack of those colors. And then we're going to talk a little bit about different basic combinations, but understanding that difference helps you be able to, in picking different colors. And there are colors that work better outside than inside. So that's a little something that you have to understand as well. And again, a lot of information, but the idea is to use the manufacturer that you're selecting to be able to pick the right color for you and to use. There's, again, remember down in Miami Beach a few years ago, the days of Miami Vice, with all the real pretty pinks and blues and violets that were being used, and yellows, real pretty, but the colors, one of the reasons that fad kind of went away quickly was the fact that those colors did not hold up. We were repainting buildings within 2 or 3 years after coating because the color changed. And understand, everything fades, everything is going to change outside, especially in South Florida. The angle of the sun, the UV rays that we get down here are much harsher than other parts of the country, being a subtropical area. So you have to understand that and take that in consideration with colors. And another reason why you see a lot of lighter colored buildings, because you don't see the color change as much in the lighter color as you do with a darker color. So when you go to school and you start to look at different colors, there's three real basic color schemes that you're using. So again, remember, imagine using the wheel at a horizontal way, and then all the different variations. But there's an analogous color schemes where you take 3 color wheels, 3 color from right next to each other, and those are the different color combinations that are somewhat popular and that will work with each other. The monochromatic tints is essentially taking that one color and just kind of getting the lighter versions of it to the darker versions and go from there with it. And then the triad colors, this is used a lot, especially with sport teams. If you'll see a lot of the sport teams that they have colors, where do they get these combinations from? A lot of that is based from you using a triad colors, where they'll see these real kind of bold color choices next to each other. And these tend to grab a lot of attention and so forth. But designers, when you're working with colors, we have color consultant on staff to help select colors, because it's a daunting task. We have over 10,000 colors, and almost every single community we're working with now wants to change their colors. And you can imagine, we have over 10,000 colors to choose from. Where do you start? And again, I've even had people in the community move out of a community just because the color that they wanted was not selected on there. And we're going to talk a little bit about that in the next presentation as well. Sheen is real important to you as well when you're looking at a coating itself. Sheen levels go all the way from flat all the way over to gloss finishes. The flatter the finish, the more dull of an appearance it's going to get. The glossier of a finish, the more durable that particular finish is going to get for you. And this is real important, both inside and outside, probably more inside than you're getting, especially when you want washability and so forth. But it's also an important factor working in South Florida with the coatings that we have down here. So again, the one thing you have to take into account though is that the higher the sheen, the more defects of the substrate's going to show. And if you think a wall is smooth and straight, you haven't seen anything until you see the kind of defects that happen when you see the kind of shine that you get on the surface, and it shows the amount of defects on the wall. Flat latexes or flat paints tend to hide those imperfections itself. So again, as a review, appearance, if you want higher sheens, it's going to accentuate the defects, the textures and imperfections. Flat hides the defects, and it's a more forgiving sheen. And the lower sheen will make a room look real smooth. Durability wise, higher sheens are generally more durable than the flatter finishes, because they have a little bit more resin, a little bit more of the guts of the paint in itself. Lower sheens are not as durable because they're not as easily clean. And glossy finishes, especially for doors, for trim, furniture, that's where you usually see a little bit more of a shiny finish like that on there. Again, when we're starting to go about finish coatings, taken into consideration, if somebody, to jump back on that flat finishes, if you're doing a lot of, and we're talking a lot about restoration work in our buildings and so forth with SB4. If you're doing a lot of concrete work on your building or homes, and somebody tries to cut out a piece of concrete and they're going to try to patch it, the ability of the contractor to match the same texture that you have existing on there is going to be very, very difficult. Even some of the more talented contractors, it's very hard to match that. So a lot of times when you're finishing on there, I always like to go with a shiny finish outside, because again, it's a little bit more durable, gives you protects the color a little bit more, but it does highlight the changes in the texture. And it actually at different times of the day, when the light shining off of that surface, it actually makes it look like a different color. So you have to be very careful when you're looking on there as well. And kind of keep that into consideration. But again, for residential, the same for building. Again, use your manufacturer to give you on there. But again, the higher the finish, the more durable the product is going to be. The lower the finish, it's going to hide imperfections, but it probably won't be as durable as you can. commercial, and you get in commercial situations, when you're having different offices or facilities and so forth, like if you have a lot of maintenance areas, again, there are different type of coatings and that will perform and give you the characteristics that will make that paint job last as long as possible. 2-component coatings are pretty much used in these areas. However, they're not as easy to use. You have to be a little bit careful when you're using that. So again, refer back to your paint manufacturer and their representative and the experience that they have to be able to recommend the right coating for you on there. And again, there's all kinds of things as specialty protection on there. VOCs is going to be something you're going to be here. VOC stand for low volatile organic compounds, and those are the carbon compounds that are released from the solvents. And that's why you see a lot of oil-based paints are not being used anymore on there because of the amount of VOC that they release into the atmosphere. There are different parts of the country that have real strict VOC regulations and another. So the kind of paints that we sell, for instance, up in New York, in Chicago, and other areas that have those, a real strict VOC regulation are not as strict. We run under, they actually have their own local regulations. We in Florida, we work under the national EPA or architectural and industrial maintenance coatings numbers, and those are a little bit higher. So you'll see a little bit difference there. Problem solving. And this part here, as we go through it, I'm just going to touch on some of the basic problems that we run into in South Florida, so we can have some time for Q&A, because the next class is probably going to take a good part of the hour to go through. But when you're looking at problems, you have to understand, there's always problems occurring on any type of surface. Understanding what the problem is will give you the right direction. So when you start getting quotes from different people, paint is a chemical. It has no personality. It doesn't react as you called it a bad name or anything like that, but paint's a chemical. If there's a failure occurring on the coating itself, there's always a reason why. And the way that you have to be able to fix this is to understand why is that occurring. That will give you the answers to be able to how to fix the problem so that it won't reoccur. Sometimes that answer is not something that is a feasible answer or something that elevates the cost. And it's actually at times easier to be able to just live with the problem and maintain it than to actually fix the problem. But again, your paint manufacturer and applicator and your painting contractor are going to be able to help you discern that and to tell you what is going. I'm a big proponent. I don't like to just put a Band-Aid on things. I want to be able to, so you're spending your money correctly, be able to let you understand what the problem is and how to fix it so you don't have no more issues. So when you see a problem, you want to ask the problem, what is the problem? Is it referring to product, the drying method, or surface prep? Where is the location of the problem? That usually gives you a lot of answers. If it's only sporadic around a paint job, then that again leads back to that it's probably a substrate related problem. What were the atmospheric conditions at the time of application? If there is going to be atmospheric conditions when the curing problems, you'll see these problems generally right away. And then how is the product applied with a brush or a roller? And that's real key to understand because again, paint's made to apply at a certain thickness. And you could over apply or under apply by using any method of application and not know the difference. And that in itself could affect how the coating is going to perform. So the biggest issue that we have in South Florida when you're problem solving, water is our enemy. And we know it, what it does to buildings, all the restoration work that is being done. The biggest key that you want to be able to understand when you're working on a problem or working on your building or whatever you're going to paint is do everything possible to keep water out. That's why we have angled pitched roofs and we have soffits to be able to keep out there. There are a lot of homes and buildings that are building square. So we got to make sure that you're doing everything possible to keep the building out. And you make sure that the contractor understands that as well. I mean, an opening around a hose water or a water hose pipe coming out of the wall, that needs to be caulked or water's going to get in there. Windows has to be caulked as well. The biggest issue of water coming into the building is not through the walls. Generally, the biggest issue that we run into buildings with is going to be around windows, around these kind of openings that will have the water come in there. So you got to address those areas because water will affect how the coating performs. Chalking, I'm sure a lot of you have seen this. Chalking occurs when you, and again, all coatings used in South Florida have a life. The environment is too strict, is too severe down here for anything to last. When you see chalking on a surface on there, remember I told you previously that the solvent evaporates, but what's left is the resin and the pigment. When you see that chalking on there, that's the actual pigment from the coating. So what that means is that glue or that resin that was holding everything together is breaking down. UV begins to do that. And when you see that kind of substrate, number one, paint as soon as possible, because especially if it's a painted surface, and you're going to see this on painted surfaces, that resin is breaking down. So that means, and if I'm depending on that previous coat for adhesion, I got to make sure that coating's in good, that previous coat's in good condition. And this is generally one of the biggest problems why peeling occurs. You have to pressure wash the surface. And regardless of what any contractor tells you, if they come back and see that this wall is clean, you don't need to use a sealer. Use a sealer. And I'm not saying because I want to sell you extra paint, because the sealer acts not only is going to bind down any kind of extra chalk, but it's going to act as a bonding agent for you, and so that the coating will adhere properly. So it's a real important that we deal with, and this is probably the number one thing that we deal with, especially outside. Inside, you shouldn't see this. If you are seeing it, that means if it doesn't get any sun, that's either you're having some water getting into the walls, it's coming out and it's causing some chalking, or it was an inferior coating that was used previous to that. Touching up paints is another problem we run into. Outside, if you paint outside, the colors, like I said, will always change. Even if you take a bucket of paint from the same job that you were using and try to touch up with it, you will probably see a difference. The shinier paint that you see, just even if you were to touch up a week later or a month later, and you were to touch up, especially as you see the shine reflecting at an angle on the wall itself, the texture of the paint on that touch-up spot is going to be different than the surrounding areas. So those areas will show up as shiners and actually look a little bit different in color and so forth. The easiest way to do it, and I know this is difficult, but the easiest way I try to do when we're solving problems with a touch-up is go corner to corner, be able to do an area. So that way you hide any kind of area. Sometimes it requires painting a little bit more, but trust me, there are some mechanics that are really good at feathering in and making sure it's right. But the easiest way to do it right is just to paint a corner to corner area of a wall where there's a 90-degree angle occurring, and that usually is able to hide any kind of those touch-ups on there. Again, going back to the stucco cracks, you see a lot of this on buildings in South Florida, expansion and contraction of the concrete. That's an area of water intrusion. You've got to be able to make sure that areas are patched. The size of the crack will affect the kind of technique and the kind of preparation you need to do on there. A lot of detail to go into. Use one of your manufacturers if you're not familiar with it to be able to give you the correct information. Mildew is our state flower of Florida. We have mildew everywhere. If we stand outside long enough, we will get mildew on ourselves on there as well. So usually you see a lot, there's mildew everywhere in all our trees in our community. You'll see this a little bit more on the north side of buildings than on the south and east and west, because that's where you get no sun. So the mildew needs a lot of humidity, poor ventilation, and very little sunlight to be able to grow. Heck, I live in a community with some oak trees, and I even get mildew on the top of my car, especially during the rainy season and so forth. All good quality latex paints, and take this in consideration, will have mildewcide in it. However, mildewcide does not guarantee that you will get mildew not growing on the surface. The dirt and everything that we get on surfaces will affect that. So that's something that you have to kind of be able to treat. Pressure cleaning or removing the mildew is not the way to do this. You have to kill that mildew that's on there. And the simplest solution is to use 1 part bleach or 3 parts water, or a combination thereof. Or there's some more environmentally friendly solutions that will be able to do it. But understand this, we live in South Florida. it's subtropical. We will always be dealing, regardless of the coating you go with, you're always going to be dealing with mildew. So it's just part of the problems that we have to deal with. Blistering is usually caused when, again, going back to a chalking surfaces. It usually have that, you see a lot of bubbling as well. That's either an indication that you painted on top of chalky surface or that there's water coming in through the substrate, and the water and the coatings are starting to release. I'm seeing a lot of this in regards to a lot of when you're painting previously painted doors, especially if you have direct sunlight hitting it in very dark colors, you're getting a lot of bubbling because essentially the water vapor that is coming around or through the coating itself is superheating on that door, and the multiple coats of paint on there is not allowing that latex paint to let that vapor permeate. And as it heats up, it wants to push through a lot faster, and it can cause the bubble to the product to peel up. Sometimes the only way to do that is to strip the door back down to a previous coating or to the bare substrate and start over again. In a lot of those cases, unfortunately, and I'm seeing this issue with all different brands. It's like putting on multiple, like if you back in the pandemic days when we're wearing multiple masks, how harder it was to breathe. Same thing when you put a lot of coatings on there. So you got to be able to handle that. Intercoat peeling. We deal a lot with that with previous coats of paint coming off a surface. If at one time somebody didn't seal or prep right, you're going to get previous coats of paint peeling, and whatever paint you put on top of that paint is going to fall apart, and it's going to pull off as well. So you have to be able to understand that. Surfactant leaching is essentially if you paint late at night and you get a little bit of humidity that we're talking about or dew on the wall itself, and especially if you're using flat latexes, you'll see in the morning as everything dries up, you'll see these kind of like a shiny areas occurring on the flat paints. That's the surfactants are chemicals that are used in paint to be able to let everything mix together. And this kind of helps it. And so whenever you see this, there's really that the paint is not bad. It's just the atmospheric conditions allowed it to do that. Flush the area with water, and generally in about a 2 to 3 month period, that sheen level will all disappear. And again, it won't affect the quality of the coating itself. Blocking is a big problem too when you're painting doors. This generally occurs with latex paints. When you put the two paints together, a lot of it's due to the curing process. Latex paints takes up to 30 days to cure, maybe sometimes even South Florida a little bit more. And if you put two coatings that are next to each other, and especially with the heat that we have in South Florida, they tend to stick. I'm sure a lot of times you've seen that where you get that little stickiness, and that's called blocking itself. Yellowing occurs when using oil-based paints. Natural resins that are used, oil alkyds are come from natural resources. All oil-based paints will yellow, will amber. You'll see that mostly with very light off-white colors or white colors, and darker colors, you won't see it as much. So if you're using interior walls, and it happens a lot in interior surface more than outside, if you're using oil-based paints on a white oil-based paint on the door and white latex paints on the walls, you're going to have off-white doors within about a year, regardless of the manufacturer you go with. That's just the way that the product works. Lapping is essentially when you see this is improper preparation or improper application of the coating. They're applying the paints a little bit too much, too heavy, and then not dipping the brush or the roller back in to put on there. Hat banding is essentially, you usually see this when they put too much paint around the corners, or the number one rule when you're painting, always cut in first and roll into the surface itself. Don't roll first and then cut in afterwards. You're painting anything, or you will see this what we call this hat banding. And there's just, again, the way that the coating is applied. Sagging, paint running, as Peggy was referring to at the top of the class, is over applying paint, or when it's a little bit too, the paint is too hot. But if you over apply paint, you're going to get this, and you're going to see the paint running or sagging like that. And again, we'll talk a little bit about that. The tanning acid is, remember I was referring to the kind of wood that you're going to be going over with. Certain type of woods have a little bit more, they have tannins, or what we call the lifeblood of wood, and water will activate that. So you have to know what kind of wood you're doing, so you don't see what you're seeing on there in the bad areas where you get that wood, that bleeding of the wood stain itself as you get through. And again, refer to us as a manufacturer, and we'll get back to you on it. So But that's it for this class. I hope you enjoyed it. Rudy, do we have any questions we need to go over real quick?
We do. We've got some. Let me fire them at you. So,
Okay.
is there? I know you spoke about mold a little bit. Is oil paint better to protect against mold?
No, absolutely not. Oil-based comes from natural resins. So if you use oil-based paints, one of the reasons we don't use oil-based paints outside as much, other than the odor and the VOCs, is because the oil-based paints will become a food source for mildew and it will grow on there. So you have to make sure that, so that's why latex resins come from synthetic resins or man-made surfaces. They tend to not to mildew, but oil-based paints are a real problem. I've seen oil-based paints almost look like a mold, kind of like a felt paper after a long time if you use the wrong type of oil-based paint.
So when it comes to mold, the biggest thing is after it's painted, it's going to be susceptible to mold. Have a preventive maintenance schedule,
Right.
1 part water, 3-4 times. So what's the best paint for exterior steel doors?
And again, a lot of it depends. Again, we like to go with the oil-based depends on what's the kind of durability you're going to need on there. But generally doors get a little bit more abuse, so you need a little bit tougher paint. Latex paints are generally good paints. There's some direct to metal semi-gloss latexes that work real well. There's a new hybrid type of coating out that's called a waterborne urethane, which is a urethane is a little bit harder finish, but now it's available in a waterborne or water solvent type of product. Those tend to work real well on metal doors. They give you excellent durability, excellent adhesion, and good mildew resistance as well.
Regardless of whether it's a metal door or wood door, isn't it most important what it was painted with previously?
Yes, it is. And again, you want to be able to find out what's on there itself. Sometimes you don't have that information. A real quick way to figure that out, Rudy, is just to be able to, if you have oil-based paint, use a little bit of alcohol or latex paint on the door. Use a little bit of rubbing alcohol on the surface itself. If it's latex, you're usually going to be, when you rub on there, you're going to get some rub off on the rag, or it's going to start to melt the paint. If it's oil-based, it'll just clean it. But these new waterborne urethanes that we're talking about, they're a little bit more forgiving, a little bit of sanding of the door, and you could put this kind of coating over top of it, and it'll serve as a transition coat and work for you as well.
Are there paints projects that provide protection against mold? We answered that one. When the resin breaks down and repainting is needed, do you recommend the surface to be primed or sealed?
We absolutely pressure clean first and seal these surfaces. And just because if you look at a lower extremity of a building and you have no chalk there, and some of the higher extremities, it's you never, when it gets a little bit more sun, you can have a little bit of chalk incurring up that you can't reach. And then again, at the same time, when it was painted the last time, maybe the guy that started painting at the top, since you can't reach it, didn't put as much paint on there as possible. So I always like to put on a coat of sealer. And again, the only reason is to make sure that you have a bonding agent on there so that the top coat would adhere to that as much as possible.
Now, if it's porous, there's a question about how to seal porous surfaces. The primer and the conditioner that's used exterior, it's not like the drywall primer that's thick and white. It's usually clear and it's a little bit more thinner. That helps with the
Yes.
with the porous surfaces, correct?
Yeah, that'll help. That we use those thinner sealers for that. A lot of these restoration jobs where you're seeing bare concrete next to painted areas, we do like to. We are recommending now using like I have a heavy duty or like a real thick. It's not an elastomeric paint, but it's a high build latex coating that's waterproof. We like to put on these bare concrete patches and then go over top of it with the latex paint, and that helps kind of even it out a little bit. But you can use the clear sealers on these bare concrete areas. The only problem is that you might need a little bit extra paint to cover those areas so that you can get the coverage to match the areas around.
So stucco over wood, how do we know it's dry and it's ready to paint?
And again, most of the time when you see wood itself, you can get a moisture meter on there. Generally, the color, the appearance of the wood itself. If you have a lot of moisture in the wood, you're going to probably see a lot of flaking paint around it if it's been on there for any length of time, because that moisture coming through will cause those coats of paint to fail. If you see rotten wood, that's usually an indication that a lot of moisture is getting in there. So don't repair those areas. First, before you do that, repair them, but first find out where the water is coming from. Fix that problem and then repair the wood or anything. Because if you don't do that, that problem is going to continue to recur over and over again until you find the source where the water is coming in.
So catwalks, how do you repaint catwalks that have a membrane on it?
Yeah, you have to make sure and that the coating that you're going to use on top of it's compatible. You can't just use any kind of coating on there. These membranes on there that are being used, especially waterproof membranes, a lot of times you have to go back with the same coating that was used on there the first time. You just can't arbitrarily take any floor paint and adhere it on there. If you're not sure, clean a surface, put some surfaces in an area, for instance, on the step or to the side of a step where you could actually use it for a couple of days and see how the coating performs and adheres.
Yeah, we'd recommend an adhesion test there on that membrane. And 9 out of 10 times, you're probably going to have to fully remove that membrane because the way that it breaks down. Membranes are totally different than kind of paints and coatings. It is technically a coating, but those membranes, it's a whole different animal. And 9 out of 10 times, it's hard to swallow because the cost is huge, but those membranes should be replaced if you want a monolithic watertight seal.
Absolutely.
Restaining or protecting a wooden pool deck. What's the best way to handle that?
And again, it's going to be a lot of work. You're going to have to redo it. You're going to have to redo it quite a bit. If you have wood decks in South Florida, require a lot of maintenance. My honest opinion is to not paint a wood deck. Let it weather naturally, because any coating that you're going to put on there, you're going to be doing it every year to 2 years, regardless what you're doing, especially if you have wood slats that are next to each other. You'll protect the top of the wood, but the wood slats that are on each side, you're going to get a lot of water, rainwater coming in it. And then if it's on top of if it's on a wood on the ground, you're going to have moisture coming up from underneath it. You do a dark color on there. The sun hits it, heats up that surface. It's going to want to draw that moisture out, just the physical nature of how it works. And that will pop the paint. So it's a wood decks are a problem. Use composite wood decks or leave those surfaces unpainted, and you'll probably be happier in the long run.
Someone was asking about how to detect water trapped behind a previously painted surface. Call an engineer, or there are a lot of moisture readers out there. There's different kinds. There's some that range to a couple $100 to a couple $1,000. But you definitely want to find out if there is moisture behind a surface. If there's a problem area, peeling, fading, bubbling, something like that, that moisture is getting behind. It could be from the liquid in the atmosphere, like you said, Rudy, but there could also be a leak that's traveling all the way down from the roof. So if you have a troubled area, most painting contractors are not going to check to see if there's water or moisture behind a painted surface. So make sure that you get an engineer out there. Even for a paint job, sometimes it might be necessary. Will older paint need to be power washed before painting? I know the answer to some of these. Absolutely, yes. You got to get that chalk off. You got to get that salt and that dirt off before the primer's on. If your contractor is not pressure washing before they're painting, they're not following the specification that Rudy's written. So yes, it has to be power washed.
And for everybody out there, Rudy and I know each other he used to work with a painting contractor, and one of the better ones in South Florida. So he knows quite a bit about painting.
Is there any way to take the high gloss oil paint down to a semi-gloss without repainting? I tried liquid sandpaper, didn't work. Sounds like he doesn't like that high sheen from that oil paint. He wants to take it down to more of a semi-gloss.
Yeah, and again, the gloss is determined by the amount of ratio of resin to pigment. So to be able to get it down to semi-gloss, the only way to do it properly to make it look decent is to repaint.
Yeah. Can you avoid moisture inside the wall area? We would love to. That's kind of the whole point of kind of painting a facade, is to make sure that, Rudy could care less if you paint the building Argyle. He just wants to make sure that your building is waterproof from the painting coating. But just because the building's painted doesn't mean that you're going to stop water intrusion behind the wall. A lot of people are overlooking the window sealants. Those should be removed and replaced along with your paint cycle. A lot of people have hurricane panels on their walls. Those are thousands of perforations in their walls. The roof, the windows, just because they have a sealant, they could be leaking on inside. The sliding glass door tracks, those screws, water can be getting in there. So our point, we're trying to avoid the moisture in the wall. Painting is one huge step of that process, but there's also a lot of other places that water can get into. Have your building fully evaluated.
Absolutely.
What's the best additive to use to paint for a non-skid surface?
A silica sand type product is usually enough. You put some on there that will make the surface a little bit rougher, so it'll tend to grab a little bit. But understand that when you paint any kind of a coating on any kind of a floor, that floor would become a very slick, regardless how much sand it's on there compared to what it was before. The other aspect about using sand or using this grip on there is that the more texture you put on the surface, the more dirt that surface is going to catch. So it's going to be a little bit harder to clean. So it's a combination of the two that you want to do. Honestly, again, in South Florida, due to the amount of concrete walkways that we have, if it's not painted, it's easier to pressure clean, and it's going to be a safer surface than if you tried to put any kind of a coating on there. You are going to run into it. You could go with some of those membranes that have a texture to it, but that is the cost of that compared to coating is exorbitant. So just remember, if you are going to paint floors, it can be done. It's a maintenance item. Every year to 2 years to 3 years, depending the amount of wear and tear that you're getting on the building.
So silicone paints became popular, and somebody's asking if you can put latex paint over silicone paint.
No, absolutely not. The adhesion, the silicones are made to be water resistant, to be able to do that kind of, and that resin that they're using in silicone, you will not get a latex paint to adhere to that. And don't let anybody make you believe that it will. It will not. I've turned down a lot of repaint works simply because I do not want to risk the association or the building into adhering that. Make sure that that will not work. If you have a silicone paint, use a silicone coating again. And if you're going to change to a silicone coating, understand that you're going to be married to silicone coatings for the rest of the life of that building.
If you want to go latex, you're going to have to fully remove that paint from that building.
Absolutely.
And that's going to be triple the cost of what it is just to repaint it with that silicone.
Absolutely.
Concrete tiles. We've seen a lot of concrete roofing tiles being painted over the last few years. Can you just kind of use your normal, paint for that? Or is there a special type of paint for concrete roof tiles?
No, you treat it the same way that you do concrete paint. You pressure clean it, you seal it, and you can put even the wall paint on there. However, understand that the angle of the roof, usually when this concrete tiles is pitched, so you're going to get more sun on there. So you're going to get a faster breakdown of the coating. So anytime you top coat a roof, the coating on there is not going to last as long as it does on a vertical substrate. So all manufacturers that I know of will not warranty the paint on a roof due to that exposure.
Correct. I'm getting just such great feedback. Thank you for the presentation. Very informative. Thank you. I learned a lot. So once again, great presentation. We really appreciate it. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, ready to start on the next one?
I wanted to see, is Lisa still on by chance? Lisa Elkin?
It does not appear so.
Yeah, and okay. All right. Well, I thought maybe she would say a few words about, they have some great rates for projects, Alliance Association Bank. So I thought I'd interject that. Okay. Thanks, Rudy.
You're welcome.
Okay. All right, jump on the next one. Okay. The next class we have, and I'm going to try to get everybody out of here by at least 4 o'clock this afternoon. No, I get it. So
No.
So we'll get everybody through it. And again, there's a lot of information we're covering on here. PDFs are available, the presentation. I'm available afterwards to be able to ask. Rudy's going to be able to, especially this class, we're going to touch a lot more what Rudy was talking about. You got resources. These groups are made to become your resources. We want to work with you. That's why we're doing, a lot of us doing this class. But at the same time, we have a reputation. We're in a relation. All of us are in a relationship business. I don't want to sell you paint for one time and say, okay, I'll see you. I'll never see you again. No, My business is based on repeat work, as is everyone else on here. We band together to be able to fight those that are not wanting to have the same thought process that we are. So, we want to make sure the work is being done right. So this is one of the reasons why I came up with a painting project class. I put this class together last year because over the years, I've been so tired of seeing shoddy work. The kind of information is being put out there by, different contractors and different manufacturers, even that, the painting project that you do on your community is generally one of the top 5 expenses on your community or building. Do it right, spend the right amount of money, do the right process to be able to do it. This processes that you're going to go through on here, a lot of you are going to look at it like, yeah, this is old school. And a lot of you are not, but it's common sense planning. It's common sense preparation. The more preparation you're going to do, the better of a paint job you're going to get out of there, as you do with any other project you're going to do in your community. But I like to touch on this just so you can understand some of if you're going to do a painting project, some of the things to watch out for, some of the things to be careful about. So that way you can make sure that if you're on a board, you have that fiduciary responsibility to your community, that you're spending that money as wisely as you can. There are no shortcuts. I'm not going to present you with a plan that's going to say, oh, I don't have to touch this. The only projects that work the best are the projects where there's involvement from all parties in this particular process, and especially in the painting as well. So again, there's a license on here, and we talked about it before. Make sure your CAM numbers are there. And again, if you want a certificate, please email me and I'll be more than happy to send your certificate on here. Some of the cases, this is the purpose and learning on there, but essentially is what I just said. I want you to be able to understand how to prepare for a paint job, how to spend your money wisely, how to be able to separate the real players that are concerned that want to do a right job compared to those that are going to try to sell you and just to get through the job done. So this is, again, there's no shortcuts or anything like that. So we'll try to run through this as quickly as possible on there. We talked about this before in a previous class, why repaint on buildings, especially in South Florida. Protection has got to be your number one reason. With SB4, that's changing the way things are done down in South Florida. And you're going to have to be, you're going to be required to be able to do this work. And then what's going to end up happening as you're doing all the structural work, as you work with engineers like as Rudy and M2E, they're going to be, you're going to be going through here. And if your building is anywhere from 25 to 30 years old, I'm not going to get into the details of it. You're going to be doing restoration work. You're going to have to protect that restoration work. And then after that point, every 10 years, you have to do an inspection. And if you're going to do concrete work, then most of the time, the painting work and the concrete work is going to be coincide with each other. At the same time, any kind of coating that you're using outside, regardless of how well you use it, you're going to get 8 to 10 years out of it maximum before you have to repaint to continue repainting your surface. So use and you don't want to get a coating that's just going to last you 8 years and then disappear. When you're repainting coatings, you want each coat of paint is like links in the chain to be real strong, because if one link becomes weak, everything you put on top of it is going to affect the way that coating is going to work for you. So you want to be able to do that. So protection, protection, protection. When you're starting a new paint job, again, when you want to start the new paint job planning, as soon as the old one ends, that's when you want to start, regardless whether it's 8 to 10 years away. You don't know how many communities I've been involved with where you start a paint job and there's zero information of the previous paint job that was done on the building or a community, how much it cost, what the paint was used, who are the contractors, and so forth. So keep that information together, because if you do run into a bad contractor, don't use them again if you have a problem with one. So that's the kind of information. And even if you don't live in the community or the building, it's our responsibility for the people that are coming afterwards to be able to help point that building the right way. And of course, responsible planning, and this is the reason why I do this, use your money effectively. Don't throw money away. You're going to get what you pay for. And you don't have to pay exorbitant fees or the highest price. but you don't usually go with the cheapest guy either. It's about getting the best value for the money that you're spending. And if you understand what's needed and what's required, you're going to be able to make the best choice possible. Not a perfect solution, but it's going to be able to help you out. I always try to, when you have a board, create a paint committee. It's a good idea. I know there's volunteering is tough, but if you cut the pie, if you help get people to involve yourself with, it'll help. But if you get a paint committee, you could have sub meetings with a paint committee. So that way, then they can get that information and present it to the board and to the rest of the community and help to be able to weed out a lot of the information. That's a real big key that I always like to recommend. Whenever you're the key elements of planning of the planning phase when you're going to paint, of course, is identifying where painting is required. SB4, I did this particular this class before SB4 came out this year. SB4 is really going to be determining if the building is 25 to 30, is going to be determining when your painting is going to have to be redone again and when the structural repair is going to be needed. It's the law. And unfortunately, we had to have an issue like we had in Surfside to be able to kick this in here. But being in the industry as long as I have, and I know Rudy as well, we saw this coming. We saw this happening. We saw this coming, and we knew that this was going to be a problem. So it cost money, but and especially those that live along the water, you have a gorgeous view. That atmosphere, that environment that we're living on there is toxic to your building. And you have to be able to plan accordingly to be able to do that. So a lot of what we do here is real important, but the SB4 is going to be doing it. And even if the building is less than 25 years old, you need to be repainting every 8 to 10 years. Don't think that any coating is that much more durable and that just because you see a lifetime warranty on a building. I'll talk a little bit about warranties later on. You'll be surprised how little it actually covers. So make sure it's done right. Remember, the board members have a fiduciary responsibility for the safety of your building. So make sure this is done right. Part of the biggest elements that you do here, and one of the things that you can do the best for yourself and the community, is a reserve study. All of us know that this is part of the SB4, where we have to do these reserve studies, but understand what a reserve study is. And it's only going to be responsible planning for your HOA or your project. And again, there's a lot of professionals out there that could help. There's a lot of managers out there that could do this. But there's a lot of professionals that could do this for you to be able to go over this type of stuff. But again, and for those that don't understand what a reserve study is, it's real quick. It's just it kind of understand in the next 10 to 20 years, what are the major repair costs you're going to have, the replacement costs of different things you're going to have to do, because things don't happen, and then to be able to plan accordingly and to be able to plan the plan as these projects come up. And let me tell you that when you're going to start, especially in buildings, you're going to start to sell more units. The one thing you're going to start as the homeowners become more savvy, they're going to start to look and ask you, what are the replacement costs coming? What is your reserve study? And so forth, because that is going to be a major situation. Because Champlain Towers North, for instance, there was apparently somebody bought $1 million unit at the top of the building, and then they had an assessment of $100,000 that wasn't revealed to them till after they moved in. So imagine getting into these buildings. So this is going to be the kind of stuff. It's only responsible to be able to do this, and again, it maintains the property values and make sure we're doing everything safe and sound and do it the way we're supposed to do it. One of the things that I like to talk about, yep.
Rudy, excuse me. Are you showing slides for this this class as well? Because they're not showing.
Oh, you're not seeing any slides?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me do something here. You know what I think I did? I don't think I did let me try it again.
Share maybe, I don't know.
Yep. How's that?
Switch.
Yes.
There you go.
Okay, sorry about that, Peggy.
Now you want to make it just one slide at a time?
You're not, oh, yep. Okay. Nope. There, how's that? We good?
Perfect.
Sorry about that. I was trying to move on quickly and I forgot to do the share part about it. So apologize about that.
Okay.
Construction lien laws. This is something that the state of Florida has, and understand this, a lien is not a bad word. A lot of people think the lien on your property is a bad word, and that, oh my God, I don't want a lien on my property. When you're doing any kind of large project, a lien protects the homeowners, a lien protects the residences of that building. So using the lien, and again, I have a handout that a PDF that we could send to you from the state of Florida that tells you the process for a lien. But essentially, the state of Florida set this up to protect the association from a contractor, from a contractor who's not planning to pay their suppliers or their subcontractors using on the job. So the lien laws are essentially a process where you will get a notice to owner that gives the supplier or the subcontractor an opportunity to recover their cost. And then what you do with these liens, it's a process. If most projects get done in pieces and segments, and as you go through a project itself, when you're going to make a payment to a particular contractor for doing the work, they will give you something called a partial release of lien. And this releases the association from any responsibility of paying the bill for the subs or for the materials used on the job itself. So it's a process, but understanding this just helps protect you. And majority of contractors understand this, and they won't have any problem working with the using the lien laws, because they understand it's about protection for yourself. So it's something that I'm amazed, honestly, to find the lack of knowledge and understanding of lien laws, especially around some property managers, where again, it's not a bad word, it's protection. Understand it, use it for your benefit, and use it to protect the association. And again, if everybody's doing everything the right way, working together, this is seamless, and it just helps make the communication process easy and takes away a problem that you might have later on down the road by getting sued by a supplier or a subcontractor for the work that you already paid for. So this is something that you don't want to have somebody double dip on you. Okay, so when you're painting a project, the considerations you should look at a project, again, right now the biggest challenge is the SB4D, the changes in the legislative changes. This is a major shift in how you paint buildings, so understand that. Other things that you need to understand are within your docs are going to be votes needed. Are you the local ordinances? You have to be able, and this is what the work that the paint committee does. And I always tell you to let the paint committee understand it. Don't let the painting contractor tell you. Understand it, so that way you're verifying, in essence, and what the information the contractor is telling you, and you're being able to separate the ones that understand their business and the ones that don't. If you know the answer and they give you the wrong answer to a question, then you know that this particular contractor is not going to be the kind of contractor that has the knowledge to be able to do your work. So all this stuff is needed. When you get into structural work, of course, bring in engineers, and we're going to talk about engineers in a little bit to be able to tell you that. Fixed colors. A lot of the things that happen right now is that everybody wants to change colors. It's a popular thing. A lot of the colors that we're using are dated. Everybody wants to change colors. So when you're changing colors, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that as well, understand, don't try to put a square peg in a round hole. Understand the architecture of your building, use the colors around it, and then there's some fixed colors, windows, maybe a roof, other things that are fixed colors that you can't change. Don't go with a color that's going to clash against that, and so forth. When I say things like excess high road dirt and so forth, I've seen buildings painted, and then within 2 or 3 months, or as the building is being painted, right next door, there's a construction coming up of a new tower. And I've had that new tower, the building next to it had to sue the developers of that tower so that they could recoat their buildings. Because again, a lot of the stuff that's going to be the dirt and all the mess from constructing a new building next to you will affect how the coating appears and looks like after a certain amount of time. So be able to keep that, keep those things into mind, and the paint committee could, kind of be aware of what's going on around you. You know, yesterday the Deauville Hotel in Miami Beach was imploded. And if everybody saw that building, the way it imploded, look at that massive cloud of dust that came out across almost 4 or 5 blocks of building. So if you're repainting the building next to it, could you imagine all of a sudden you have to start all over again? And it's not the painting contractor's fault, because they're not going to know that particular area. But those are the kind of things to do it. When you're keeping any kind of member in any kind of paint committee or color committee, as we're talking about in a minute, keep it odd. So that way you're never going to get 100%, and you keep it even. There could be a split and you'll be kind of tied, but keep an odd number on the committee. So that way we could use the democratic values and to be able to pick and to move forward with the project itself. Structural safety, again, a lot of people don't understand, and board members, it is a fiduciary responsibility of the board members that they understand the structural safety of the building and to make that building safe. Education is going to be your best defense. Having a go-to professional as M2E and Rudy Munyon to assist you. And I would recommend that every building in South Florida have at least some, even if you're not doing any work right now, have someone as a go-to professional that is available to you, that you have a relationship with, so that as issues and come up throughout the life of your building, or to be able to come out and to be able to assist you, and they could point things out. And that way, again, it will falls back to the reserve study. You see where things are coming and what you have to start planning for in the future. And having that relationship with an engineer like M2E is going to be, it's going to be necessary from here on out in the world and in the state of Florida, and soon throughout the rest of the country. It's going to be just something that needs to be done, and is long overdue. Again, the other thing is, life safety issues have to be given top priority. None of us want to see anything like Champlain Towers happen again. So, and it's inevitable. Do not put things off. I was not involved with Champlain Towers, but I lived in Miami for most of my life, 50 years of my life, and I saw a lot of buildings in that kind of situation. And these things cost money. And the earlier you get at it, the better you're going to be, the less money you're going to spend, and the better prepared you're going to be. So I'm going to pass these discussion questions because I want to be able to understand, get through the information itself. Color. If a color change is warranted, and let me tell you, about 80-90% of the buildings that I'm doing are color changes. Understand, again, unless you have a design professional living in the building that wants to become part of your quote color committees, you see if we put on here, understand, use these kind of colors to be able to understand and to be able to work with the color, work with your fixed colors, and understand what's the popular colors that use on there. When I put the word use the right colors, we mentioned it previously. There's colors, there's pigments. The colors that you see come from two main sources. There's synthetic sources, and then there's natural resources. The colors, the pigments that come from natural resources, Mother Nature has done a real good job of making those colors hold up a little bit better. Clay, the yellow clay, the red clay, use those kind of colors. They tend to hold up a little bit better. Synthetic resources like what you're seeing in the screen there, those really pretty yellows and blues and all those colors, those are synthetic. Those come from manufactured pigments. These colors don't last as long. And again, fading is normal in South Florida on any color, and it is not covered by a warranty from any manufacturer. So we'll talk a little bit more about that, but understand that. But again, always recommend having a color committee. I've seen color being selected, delay a job without any, and again, no joke, 2 to 3 years, because you cannot get consensus on a color. And I've seen people move out. So when you're selecting colors, again, always try to put a true gray swatch underneath the color. Every color that you look at has the main color. For instance, say it's a gray, if you're looking at a gray color, but each color has an undertone underneath it. Either it'll be warm or be cool. Warm colors are usually the reds with the yellows. The cool colors are the blues and maybe a little bit of green. So you have to be able to look at the undertone of the colors and be able to understand that and consider the sun's temperature. The way that the sun hits the color is going to make that color look different. So whatever color that you go with, always try to look at it at different times of the day and put it on the buildings. And when you see it on a swatch, doesn't necessarily mean that's exactly what you're going to see when you put it on your building or your home. It's going to look different itself. So be able to understand that. And like I said previously, everything fades in South Florida. The deeper colors, the darker colors, just show it more than the lighter colors do. So, but everything fades. Even I always use the analogy, take your car, put it out on the beach, leave it there parked for 10 years without washing it, without cleaning it, just leave it out there. What do you think that car is going to look like? That finish of that car is going to look like. And the coating used on the car is a urethane. It's a lot more durable coating than what's used on buildings. So imagine that difference. So try to keep that in consideration when you're picking colors and understanding colors itself. When you're working with colors itself, always, and again, every color that you're going to be using, even if it's a white, it's going to be mixed up by the manufacturer. So when you have that paint committee together, whoever you're using, make sure that that color, that paint manufacturer is actually giving you actual drawdowns of the color. And what is a drawdown? You can see the sheet there, a sheet that looks similar to that. You'll actually put an actual paint sample of the paint that you're using in the color you're going to use. And at the top, you see some lines there. That's where you're going to get the sheen level, and you're going to get the owners of the association or the representatives to sign off on that color being used. And why do we want to do that? Because again, each bucket of paint, if you're painting a building that's going to take 500 to 1,000 gallons, very rarely does a contractor going to order 1,000 gallons at a time. They're going to generally order 50 to 100 gallons at a shot. A lot of the times it's because of storage. So by having this drawdown, what that does is make sure that, once a color is mixed, it's not returnable, but having a signed drawdown makes the manufacturer responsible to deliver that same color each time. It gives the contractor responsibility to make sure to double check the contract, to double check the store as well, that the right color is mixed before they put it on the wall. Because just because the manufacturer sends the wrong color and the contractor doesn't check and put it on the wall, whose fault is it at them? It's really both, but it's usually, why avoid that by having these kind of things. So this is a real important part when you're doing a paint project, to make sure that whoever you're using, the supplier, will be giving you a drawdown of the colors you're going to be using itself. And this part here, I'm not just saying it because I'm a manufacturer. Manufacturers offer a lot of different incentives and they have different warranties. So make sure that, I always like to say, start with a paint manufacturer. The paint manufacturer is going to give you the understanding of the standards to use for this preparation of the substrates. They're going to tell you the coating that's going to hold up. They're going to give you the warranty on the surface itself. And why not let the manufacturer tell the contractor, tell the contractor to prepare a surface in a certain way to make sure it's being done correctly. And I'm telling you, if you got 5 different contractors giving you 5 different proposals without a manufacturer already selected, you're going to get 5 different systems about how to prepare. So use a manufacturer. The warranty comes from the manufacturer. It doesn't come from the painter. It comes from the manufacturer. And then there's a lot of other services. We have, for instance, for myself, I have color consultation. I have color rendering services. So that we give for free when we're doing these kind of coatings and stuff. And so do other manufacturers, to be honest with you. So, sorry about that. But we have I had a light fall in my office, so apologies about that. But that's one of the things that you have to do. Also, manufacturers, for instance, I've been around for 33 years working in the same industry in South Florida. I have relationships with engineers and contractors, and I know the contractors that, again, we depend on repeat work for our survival. So we want to be able to do this kind of repeat work. So most manufacturers will have those relationships, and they could recommend you some certain contractors and steer you away from the ones that maybe won't do the work right. And then the record keeping, make sure that, every building and home is going to be painted. you're gonna have to do a certain amount of maintenance work on there regardless. So make sure that you have a store or a supplier that has those records for you. The last thing you want is to be able to have to touch up or to figure out what was used the last time itself. And the other thing, when you're selecting a paint manufacturer, use a store or manufacturer that's close by you. I mean, I've seen so many buildings that are buying paint from a store that's 50 to 60 miles away. And just because a store 50 or 60 miles away, they'll sell you the same paint, but just because they have the certain color, that means, are you going to go back to that store 50, 60 miles away when you need a gallon or two to touch up or to fix things up? Use local around you. In our area down here, regardless of the manufacturer you're going with, there's qualified manufacturers and stores around you that could be able to fix those things for you and take care of you. The specifications that we talked about, essentially what they are just a set of instructions from this manufacturer. We're going to detail out, there's a sample of the work that we do, detail out what the scope of the project looks like, what's going to be painted, what's not going to be painted, any special instructions, and then gives you the instructions that the contractor has to follow. The idea behind this is that you, as a paint or requiring the paint job, you tell the paint contractor what you need. Don't let it happen the other way around. If you tell the painting contractor what you need, then when you start getting proposals, you're going to be able to bid apples to apples and not by comparing what this one particular guy says to the other. Like where I was referring to in the previous presentation, I had a good friend of mine in Atlanta. She received a proposal. She has a really nice home, cost $18,000 to paint her home. And the only thing they had on there is prime and paint. That's it. Nothing about the preparation, nothing on there. So if they start preparing, how are they who's going to hold it to that standard? And when you're spending a couple of $100,000, $1 million for paint jobs, the association and the owners of the property, you deserve to be able to tell that contractor how to prepare the building and to do it right. And again, a lot of this, one of the other things I like to do is to make sure that the specification is included in the contractor's proposal. I've seen it a lot of times where even though you ask the contractor to bid a work, they will put their own instructions in the proposal and not include the paint specification. And then the association signs off on it. And guess what? It doesn't make a difference what the paint manufacturer put together. You're obligated legally, the contractor is legally obligated to do the prep work as you signed off on. So that's why make sure you're doing on there. And then the other thing that you want to be able to do is to make sure, usually in a building or community, there's a lot of options and special pricing. Make sure that the supplier matches the options and so forth, so that you could be able to tell apples to apples, a comparison next to each other, instead of having a contractor put the base work at one price, and which is usually a lot cheaper than a contractor that includes all the different work together. So make sure that the format of the price is the same. And then when you narrow it down to the last 2 or 3 contractors, interview the supervisor of that particular contractor to make sure you're doing it right. And again, these are some of the things to be able to keep when you're looking at the manufacturers. Paint warranties, we'll touch on that real quick. Paint warranties go anywhere from 5 to 10, 15 years. In South Florida, you're going to have to repaint over it again. The one thing that a lot of manufacturers don't like to talk about is that the warranties only apply to masonry surfaces. Does not apply to wood, does not apply to metal, does not apply to concrete floors. Only the vertical surfaces itself. Fading and chalking are not covered. Peeling and flaking is not covered if previous coats of paint come off of there. So that's why look at when you get the manufacturer's warranty, read it, understand the legality of it so that you can understand what's being covered itself. Your best bet to be able to work and get the right warranty is to make sure that you're selecting the right coating, the right engineer, the right supplier, and that they all work in tandem as a team to be able to work together to get the job done right. There's no shortcuts. Just like any other project that you're doing, you have to be able to do this work. Knowledge, understanding what's needed is going to be able to do that work the right way for you and to get the right job for you itself. 1 coat of sealer and 1 coat of paint generally qualifies for most warranties. However, coverage is not guaranteed by any manufacturer. So you're changing colors from say a yellow or a beige to say a white or a light color. You have to, most of the time, you're gonna have to get 2 coats of paint on there along with the sealer. So that's an extra cost in doing that. But don't let anybody fool you. The contractor, at the end of the day, is the one responsible for painting and for coverage. And because again, I could take a can of paint and make it cover 1,000 square feet without adding a drop of water to it. So if you let the contractor do that, and again, you don't want to nickel and dime a contractor to the point that they're not going to do a good job for you. We're all in business to make a fair profit and to keep feeding our families and friends. So be able to let a contractor understand what the color is, and that's why it's important before you get to we haven't even talked about contractors yet. Pick the right color and pick the right colors and so forth, and understand what the warranties cover or not. And don't let a manufacturer fool you into what's being covered or not on them. So we'll pass these questions again. Paint 101, we covered a little bit about that in the previous slide. All paints are basically the same. There's no real secrets. Just the biggest difference that you see in the coatings itself is the quality of each of those pieces that are going into a can of paint. There's no secrets. If a can of paint, you're buying a can of paint for $25 a gallon at one supplier and another can of paint for $50 a gallon, there is a difference in the can of paint. It's still a can of paint, but the quality of the products and the ingredients being used is what what makes the difference. One manufacturer won't, again, we all know we're in a competitive marketplace. We know that we have to be competitive. So look at the prices of paint. Don't let a supplier tell you that a $25 can of paint is equal to a can that costs $50 or $60 can. It is not. So understand the difference on there. Different things you can do with paint. These are the gauge I have on there is a wet film thickness gauge. Measure the amount of paint. All manufacturers of reputation will have a technical data sheet on their products, will tell you the theoretical coverage, but then the millage or the thickness of the coating that you have to achieve when it's wet and when it's dry. That little gauge that we have on there, that's a wet film thickness gauge, will tell you when a manufacturer, how much thick a coat of paint needs to be applied. And you can see the difference there, that it has to be between 5 to 6 mils thick on the wet part of it. And then if they put it at 5 to 6 mils, it will dry to 2.3 mils on there that you put on there. But the coating has to be applied at the right thickness when you're putting on there. And that gauge will help you assure things. Sealer, we talked about this just to the end. Seal exterior masonry surfaces. This same sealer a lot of times could be used on previously painted wood and previously painted metal. What it does, it binds any chalk that's left over from pressure cleaning and serves as a bonding agent. And if you use sealer, you're usually going to use less paint because it seals the surface and you're not going to soak into the substrate itself, and the paint lies on top of it. So that way it's going to perform better for you as well. And usually use about 25% of sealer to paint. So it's really not a significant cost when using sealer itself. We talk about one coat coverage. Understand, no one guarantees one coat coverage, no manufacturer. So if you're changing colors, give the contractor, be fair, give the contractor the opportunity after you selected the color to make sure that they're going to get the coverage in either one coat of sealer with one coat of paint, or you want the building to look good. So you want to make sure that they get the coverage, and the second coat of paint might be needed on there. Project management, here we go, selecting a structural engineer. The same research that you're going to be doing when the contractor, ask questions. Find people that are going to be able to, that have a good reputation. Prepare a list of questions when you be at the interview. It's amazing how many times I've been to different board meetings where we all sit down around the table and we start talking about, okay, we got the paint project, and we all look at each other there's no questions being asked. So prepare questions that you want to know. I have a PDF of a list of questions to ask painting contractors. that I'll be more than happy to send to you. Just let me know. But at least it's not all the questions you should ask, but hopefully it'll start to stir and have these questions prepared. So that way you could ask the same questions to each contractor, to each engineer, and see how they answer, so you could do a better comparison on there. Also, there's all kinds of articles on there around. I got one article that was written back in 2012 called The ABCs of Concrete Restoration. Understand the basics. If you understand what is going to be required of a job, and you can see what this whole course is to be able to understand and know the answers before you ask them. So that way you could separate the players and the ones that are fakers, as I like to say, to make sure that they're doing the right information on there. And as with painting contractors, you'll see, meet their project supervisor. A salesman is nice. They're great people. Rudy's one of the nicest guys you're ever going to meet. But you know what? He's not going to be able to be at your job site every day. So you want to be able to meet that supervisor. Make sure, honestly, and not being biased, because I'm Spanish, is to make sure they speak English and to be able to speak in a language that you're going to be able to communicate with them as the project goes on. Restoration painting contractors is essentially the same thing. Go through the same thing, referrals, internet, prefer the questions. Your paint manufacturer is going to have relationships with certain suppliers, with certain painting contractors. Use them as a resource to be able to pick the right painting contractor out. Skip through that. And here's the biggest part. When you put all your apples together and you do all this homework and everything together, there has to be project management on the job itself. The jobs that have a project management of either a board member, property manager, or if they bring someone in, are the most successful jobs that will happen. If you don't have, just because a contractor is going to tell you, I'm going to do this, this, and this, and you sign off on it, unless someone's watching over their shoulders, you're not going to know. So make sure that you're doing this. One of the things that, I've seen a lot of times where I've been on a job site and I asked the supervisor, what paint are you using? How's it, have you seen the specification? And they look at you and going like, what's a paint specification? And I've seen it, and it's very frustrating when that kind of stuff happens. So you got to make sure, essentially you got to make sure you're making sure that they're delivering what they signed for. And it's just, again, if you do this project management, it happens. Having a pre-job meeting before a job starts, real key. It tells you to be able to, you basically all parties come together. Everybody knows. One of the things that I like to recommend is inspections. When you're doing inspections, on a big project, especially a tall one like that, for instance, myself, I'm not allowed to get on the scaffolding to be able to go up and down the building. I wouldn't want to anyhow, because I'm scared of heights. But at the same time, if you're able to meet together on a regular basis, you want to be able to know if there's a problem occurring on a building before it gets to the end of the job. Okay. And this is the kind of stuff, if you meet on a regular basis, you can inspect the work that's getting done. You can address issues that come up, and guaranteed on any project, you're always going to have issues that are a surprise. It happens. And if you're meeting on a regular basis and you have everybody involved together, the supplier care for you and make sure that they move together. So these regular inspections really are key to a project getting done correctly and properly, to make sure that things go well, and you address any issues like you do. One other thing that the manufacturer should do, or the supplier, is that they should be keeping track of the amount of paint and sealer being used. Because if the average amount they should be using of paint to sealer is about 15 gallons or 15% to 20% of sealer to paint. And if at the end of the job, they bought 10 gallons of sealer and they used 500 gallons of paint, guess what? They didn't seal most of the surface. So, and if on these weekly meetings, those suppliers should be able to keep you up to date, to make sure that purchase is going on. So that way they're doing all these kind of things like that. Final inspection, you'd be surprised how many people, everybody has a good relationship. At the end of the day, there's no final inspection. But make sure that all the partial releases of liens are done. All the payments are done. All the warranties are issued by whoever's being involved in. You'd be surprised, Barry, about 80% of the jobs that I write a specification on, and this is no joke, never ask for an issue, a warranty, a certificate of warranty for the paint, because it's just forgotten or not needed. It really doesn't make a difference, because as a manufacturer, we're going to be responsible for it. But those are things to have done. Make sure that all outstanding concerns are done, all touch-ups are completed, and everything like that when you're doing the final inspection, so you can make the final payment. And then, in conclusion, remember, paint job doesn't last forever. The structural work is not going to last forever. Start planning for your next paint job when that one finishes. We live in a digital world. There's no reason why everything should be kept in a digital file. And even if people move out or property management changes, you should be able to pass it along one to the other, and to make sure that you're doing the work the right way. And again, going through all these things, remember, repaint before existing paint begins to chalk. Establish a paint committee. Do the HOA, planning, reserve studies gives the HOA or the building the ability to budget appropriately, and make sure that you have everything on file for the next time you're going to paint. So other than that, that's pretty much it. I mean, it's, again, common sense. No, it takes a lot of work. You're not going to be able to skip steps. Same principle will work for everything else, but this will be something that you could use that will work for you on, and these principles on any project of any kind. All right, Rudy, do we have any questions?
We do. Let's fire through them. Is there an average cost for painting?
No, well, yes, there is, but each building is completely different. So you really have to look at each building and for instance, simple hanging swing stages if you're doing a tall building, or what are some of the issues you have to run into. So no, there's not a cost. When you're doing new construction, sometimes you can get $1 per square feet, but when you're doing repaint buildings, you really have to look at each building separately. But if you have the same set of instructions, specs, and you get proposals from different contractors, that way you make sure that you're getting the right prices. If you get 5 proposals, 3 of them are together, one is real high, one is real low, I would tend to throw out the other 2, the high and the low, unless they could justify why they're so different than everyone else.
I agree. If you have that specification, I like to think of it as a recipe. Everybody needs to bake off of that same recipe. If
Absolutely.
you leave it up to the contractor's interpretation, pricing is going to be all over the place. And in an industry average, it should be about 10 to 15%. So if there's a $100,000 paint job, somebody might be at 100, somebody might be at 110.
Right.
If somebody's at 85, throw that guy out or girl out. If somebody's at 155, ask them and relook at their number. They obviously missed something and went wrong. So there is no average cost, but there should be an industry average. It should be in about 10 or 15%. Our concrete textured building is scheduled for a paint job this year. In the next 6 months, a new building project is started. How do we balance the resealing of the building and the grime expected for the new construction within 10 feet of our building?
Well, I mean, that's one of the things, Rudy, I know you've been involved with that before. I mean, that's a discussion you have to have with the developer, the project next door, and you have to really honestly just consider that if they're going to put up a building within 6 months after you paint, it might be better off to wait till after the building is done, because if not, that grime is going to be on there, and a lot of that is not going to wash off, and you're going to have to go through there. And like I said, that I've had that happen before, where the board had to sue the developer next door. A lot of times the developers will have that built into their project, and they'll say, sure, go ahead and paint. We'll send you some paint afterwards. So I've seen that done as well. But communication, and talk to the developer and see what their position is going to be on how they're going to handle it. Tell them that you need to paint your building. You have no choice, and how they're going to respond to that.
Dennis, please give me a call after this. There's a lot of things that have to be taken in consideration when new construction is going up next to your building. I hope that your property manager or your property lawyer is in contact with that developer's lawyer. I left my number in the chat. Please feel free to give me a call on that. Is bubbling covered during the warranty? Depending what causes the problem. If there's previous coats of paint on there, bubbling 95% of the time is caused with water getting behind the coating, and it's escaping, and it's trying to escape. A lot of times when you have multiple coats of paint on there, but like wearing multiple masks, we talked about it before,
all latex paints outside will breathe, but if you have several coats of paint on there, like wearing masks, it's harder for the coating to breathe. And if too much water is trying to get out, it will push the paint away, and that's not part of the warranty.
You know, a quality contractor should, you know, come out and, you know, look at those bubbles and help you assess. If you paint a building, but you didn't do the window sealants and water is running down the sheer glass and going into that window sealant, then it's getting behind your paint. The manufacturer didn't do anything wrong. The applicator didn't do anything wrong. There's water getting behind that paint and bubbling up. And because it's latex, it could actually bubble up and look like a water balloon, like a latex water balloon. So
Yeah, I
that's
put Rudy,
usually not covered
you-
in the warranty from my understanding. And
Right.
it means you have water intrusion and there's a
Nope, he froze up. Rudy froze up a little bit.
Mhm.
All right, well, to intercede a little bit, what Rudy was talking about, in my specifications, I caulk around all windows, all those things to make sure you got no water coming into the substrates themselves. And again, 90% of the problems that I solve, 80 to 90% of the problems that are solved are they're not related to the manufacturer of the coating. As a contractor and a structural engineer myself, we are a relationship business. 80 to 90% of the problems that I fix are nothing due to the paint, but just to enhance or to continue the relationship so that the next time it happens. And if you have a good quality manufacturer and a good quality supplier and painting contractor, that's part of our business, and we work with that all the time.
So window sealants, should those window sealants have a chance to cure before they're painted?
Now, generally, the ceilings that we use on there, they're paintable caulk. First of all, you don't want to use a siliconized product that won't adhere to it. So the paintable caulk, so usually they need just about a day or two of dry timing to be able to paint on top of it without any kind of issue.
Some of those new products out have even been shortened to 4 hours
Yep.
that we've seen.
Absolutely.
So there's a few requests, and Peggy's going to send out an email after the presentation, and she's going to include everybody's contact information. So everybody from Lisa to Beth to Rudy to me, the other Rudy, will be on there. Rudy will also provide her with the slides in a format so everybody will be shared. Vinteum has been recorded that. When they have that up on their YouTube channel, she'll be able to provide the link for that. Rudy, they're also requesting that checklist that you have for contractors.
Okay.
If you can share that to Peggy. And then you'll also get an email probably from all of us individually with a deeper kind of definition of our scopes and services. But Peggy will send one out that's going to be pretty informative. Thank you, everybody, for the presentation. It was absolutely great. Thank you for the feedback. Thank you for the questions. We appreciated it. Peggy, I'll leave it off to you.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. Like Rudy was saying, and it's always great to have you give a class because you have so much knowledge. Rudy, it's just crazy. The only thing that crossed my mind, you're welcome, is that be sure and have all of your contracts reviewed by an attorney. Don't sign anything. We had an excellent presentation on contracts earlier this year, and Jane Boland was the attorney that said, you know, have all contracts reviewed, which would be covering all your responsibilities as a board member and a property manager. I do want to close by saying thank you to everyone. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving. I hope you and your family and your friends enjoy your holiday. Thanks for attending the entire year. Thank you, Rudy Martin, for the many, many times of moderating. And thank you to the sponsors once again. I do want to say, in light of unfortunately another shooting yesterday, I always close with this, and that is if you see something or hear something, please say something. Have a nice holiday.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone. Have a nice holiday. Bye.
Bye.